Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today I have started my 2023 NFL Deep Dive series where I rank every single NFL team from last to first according to my opinions based upon player grades that I've given out myself based upon performances last year and in college, of course, kind of nerfing the college rankings a little bit according to how those reflect in the NFL, but still think it's pretty fair. I rank each position group according to how it matches up with the rest of the league. I go through an entire season of record predictions that I do for every single team, and then whatever team pops up there at the end, that's in last, they go first, and that today is the Arizona Cardinals. They have a lot of moving parts going on. Kyler Murray, the quarterback, is sort of a question mark coming in with his injury. When's he going to end up playing? Sort of projecting around mid-season, which is what I sort of based it off of. So you're going to see maybe his rankings are a little bit lower than what you would expect. That's because what's his impact going to be coming off of that injury for half an NFL season on a team that's not really that good? And of course, all the roster positions are based upon at the time of recording. So at the time of recording here, DeAndre Hopkins was cut. Budda Baker is still a member of the Arizona Cardinals, so don't come back for me a month from now if Budda Baker has been traded and be like, Budda Baker's not on the team. I don't have a time machine, guys. I wish I did. It would make this a lot easier because then I would just bet on a team winning the Super Bowl and win every single time, but I can't do that. But now let's get right into it. We're going to start with the coaching staff that I rank first to last, and then we'll get into the player grades. Let's get to it. Thanks for coming. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Leave your comments in the comment section. Of course, help out with those algorithms. Now let's get to it. I promise now we're going to it now. Yeah. So let's kick it off with the coaching staff, which I rank 30th in the NFL coming in. And the reason it's 30th is just because there's just not a lot of knowledge around what kind of coaching staff this is really going to be. There's not a lot of experience for these coaches at any of these major positions. And I'll start with the man in the middle, Jonathan Gannon, who's the ex-Eagles defensive coordinator coming over in his first year as a head coach. Very surprised that this is the direction Arizona went, going with a defensive guy. You would have thought that maybe they would have gone with maybe an offensive guy to work with Kyler. That may be a sign that Kyler may not be long for this world with this team. But Gannon's bringing over he had a lot of talent in Philly, which I think a lot of Eagles fans are, they don't really like Jonathan Gannon. For whatever reason, they had a great defense last year. They didn't really like his play calling, his personnel choices, and especially his decision-making in the Super Bowl, even though everyone gets lit up by the Kansas City Chiefs. But it is what it is. What will he do with significantly less talent, I think, is the key here. And how long is the rope that they're going to give him? He did bring with him his linebackers coach that he had in Philadelphia. You see him there on the right. That is Nick Rallis. Shout out to Madcap Moss of the WWE. That is his brother, actually. But what we saw from Rallis was some pretty quality coaching for the linebackers in Philadelphia. Kaiser White came over. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But TJ Edwards got a giant contract from the Bears due to the play that he had last year, which, you can credit Rallis for. And I think they got a lot of potential at the linebacker position, as we'll talk about later, that Rallis could really work with. And now being a defensive guy, is he going to be the one calling the defensive plays, or is that going to be with Jonathan Gannon? I think that it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works out. And then the man on the left is Drew Petzing. He was the Browns quarterbacks coach last year. He also has experience being the Minnesota Vikings wide receivers coach, specifically during the time where Stephon Diggs had his breakout season. And he's got his work cut out for him, man. The quarterback position, trying to work with Kyler, if Kyler is the long-term answer, how he's going to work with some of the backups, Colt McCoy, Clayton Tune, the rookie, during training camp and into the regular season. Jonathan Gannon, as a head coach, is not an offensive guy, so Petzing's really going to be the guy in control of that offense for the most part. Definitely in terms of play calling and play design. His position coaches are really going to have to step up as well. They don't have a great wide receiver room, especially with Hopkins gone now. But they did draft a guy to replace him in Michael Wilson from Stanford. We'll talk about him a bit later as well. So Petzing's got a lot of work to do, and just doesn't have the experience or the pedigree as an offensive coordinator to justify really ranking this coaching staff high. It's a very inexperienced coaching staff overall, and I don't know that the potential is truly that high for them, at least in comparison to other coaching staffs. So this is going to be a team that's going to have to significantly overachieve in terms of player development, in terms of strategizing and play calling, especially in the division that they're in. And it's just not, year one is not looking up, let's say, for the Arizona Cardinals and this coaching staff. Tons of work ahead of them. So let's get into some of the player grades here. We'll start with the quarterback, Kyler Murray, and this is going to focus on the passing game to open up here. And I'm going to give Kyler Murray a grade of 74. I'm much higher on Kyler Murray than a lot of people are. But again, this is based on him playing potentially just half the season. You see the depth there with Colt McCoy, give him a 66. Clayton Tune, the rookie, I give him a 71. I really liked Clayton Tune's game in college the more that I started to watch him during the draft process. And when he got picked by Arizona, I was like, this guy could be the day one, week one starter, beating out Colt McCoy, especially if the Cardinals are just sort of accepting the fact that this year is not going to be a great year for them. So why not just, give the rookie a shot to make a play? If he plays well, you overachieve, then maybe it changes your strategy a bit going forward. Maybe you get a Brock Purdy type play out of Clayton Tune. I think it's certainly possible. I do think for week one, he's probably may not be the best option depending on what Arizona's strategy is. But I think, if Colt McCoy comes in, starts 0-3, which is very likely, why not play Clayton Tune until Kyler Murray comes back? I don't see the harm in that. But overall, I think Kyler Murray is still going to have the most significantly positive contributions to this team if he even sees the field at all this year. Because I think his skill level over McCoy and Tune is quite significant. I don't know exactly what I would grade him if he was guaranteed to play the full year. But it would definitely be higher than 74, which is not that high in terms of the rest of the league. Now, maybe one of my hottest takes so far is in terms of how I graded out the running backs in terms of their contributions in the receiving game and the passing game, the receiving backs, how they would grade out in third down. And Tyson Williams, the former Baltimore Ravens running back, I actually graded him out the highest out of everybody at 65. So I think on those third downs, we could see him seeing the field and James Conner maybe taking a ride on the bench a bit. You see Corey Clement in there, not really a great third down back. Keontae Ingram, because there's more to also being a running back in the passing game than just your ability to catch, maybe run routes. It has a lot to do with your vision, being able to pick up blitzes, being able to know which offensive lineman to assist in terms of pass blocking, when to release. And I think that overall, Tyson Williams will be the best at that out of everyone. It's not really in James Conner's game to be that. 65 is still not a high grade, say, compared to what you'll see I gave someone like Christian McCaffrey later on in this series. But this is a real opportunity for this running back room, kind of like the receiver room that we're going to talk about in a minute, for somebody to break out, because there really isn't an alpha in this room. There's about maybe 2 or 3 guys really that could end up taking over this running back room, especially with a new coaching staff. They didn't sign James Conner, this new coaching staff. They brought in Tyson Williams, they brought in Darrell Williams, so they're in that camp more so than they are committed to someone like James Conner, Corey Clement, even though Corey Clement has ties to Philadelphia. And then Keontae Ingram, just, whatever. Now we're looking at their receiving threats with the receivers and tight ends that I think will see the field. The most will start with Hollywood Brown, who I give a 70. I think the Ravens finessed Arizona. I also think that these grades are probably a little bit lower as well because of what the quarterback situation is going to look like, who's going to be the quarterback. So, the grades are a little bit nerfed here based upon what we're probably going to see the first half of the year. Greg Dortch, give him a 66. I think he could see a lot more play this upcoming season. Rondale Moore's really going to have to step up. Gave him a 64. Zach Ertz gets a 67. These are the four best guys, I think, going into week one. I think they're a little undersized at receiver, which could contribute to Michael Wilson seeing more playing time, specifically in the red zone. Even Trey McBride, the backup tight end, coming in. But as we get to their depth grades, Michael Wilson, the rookie, gets a 62. Zach Pascal, a veteran presence out there, 60. He's one of those guys who I think will play in the slot on early downs, potentially, because he does have some pretty good blocking abilities. Trey McBride needs to really have a bounce back year for a sophomore year with a very just not impressive rookie season. Noah Tagovailoa is just, he's a depth tight end on this roster. He'll probably be competing with other guys that they might be bringing in during training camp for that third tight end spot. But as you can see, not a lot of significant depth for the receiver, the tight end, Michael Wilson. I think as the season goes on, we'll get more and more opportunities, especially because he's a different type of receiver than the other ones that they have. Zach Pascal, like I said, early down stuff for him mostly in the slot. I do expect Dortch, Moore, and Hollywood Brown to sort of take over the big play aspect of the offense. Now going to their offensive line in terms of their ability to pass block. And you see there, we'll start with DJ Humphries, who gets a grade of 81. He's the best pass blocker on the team. We also look at the right side of their offensive line. Will Hernandez gets a 79, and Kelvin Beachum gets a 76. The two new additions to this offensive line is, I'll start with the glaring issue there, is Froholt from the Browns, and I forget what other team he may have played for, but he comes in. He is by far the worst pass blocker of the starting five. It's not really where his game is that strong. It's going to need a lot of developing. Maybe a quick passing game will really help him out. And then you got Paris Johnson Jr., who was the 6th overall pick, who is going to start as the 6th overall pick. I think left guard is really where he's going to settle in probably early on. Really, Kelvin Beachum, to me, is the guy that's got the question marks as whether or not he's going to start. Because as we get to the depth, there is Josh Jones, who I grade them equally. I think overall Josh Jones is a better player than Kelvin Beachum and should probably get the playing time over Kelvin Beachum. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. For whatever reason, it just seems like Josh Jones has sort of settled in as like the 6th offensive lineman on this team, where I think there's a lot of teams out there that would like him as a starter. And I think that when it's all said and done, he'll probably end up being the starter by the end of the year at the right tackle position, if not the left guard position, if they decide to kick Paris Johnson out to right tackle. Jackson Barton, a very backup tackle in the passing game. Eli Wilkinson, I think, is a solid backup for the interior, potentially a right tackle in a pinch for pass blocking. John Gaines, the rookie, who they picked up, will be a good backup center going forward. And then Lycidas Smith and Dennis Daly, guard and a tackle, I think will be truly competing for roster spots, probably end up on a practice squad and called up if they need some more offensive line depth throughout the season. Most teams will keep like 8 to 10 offensive linemen depending on who exactly is on the roster and what they see of their starting five and sort of the injury concerns. I think that you can see the top 4 depth players, though. I think there's enough quality there where I think that they'll settle in on 9 offensive linemen. And Lycidas Smith and Dennis Daly will be the odd men out. Now we're going to move on to the run game, and we'll start with the rushing threats. the main top 3 rushing threats. And start with Kyler Murray, 72. What's it going to look like him coming off the ACL? Generally, before the ACL injury, I probably would have put Kyler Murray in somewhere in the low 80s. But considering he's not going to be playing half the season, can't harp on that enough. And what's he going to look like coming off of that lower body injury? We saw what it did to RG3's career. Could it do the same to Kyler Murray's? It'll be interesting to see. James Conner, and Darrell Williams almost grayed out equally in terms of the running game for me. Conner, just because I think he's really living off that, 17, 18 touchdown season that he had I think it was his first year in Arizona, and he got that contract extension. I'm not buying him, to be honest. I think that was just an anomaly year. You get a lot of those 1-yard touchdowns, those short yardage plays. I think there's a real shot that Williams ends up being the guy on first and second down. The only way I can really see James Conner taking over him in terms of the amount of playing time, the amount of snaps he takes, is because he's a little bit better than Williams in the passing game in terms of a pass blocker. But again, we saw earlier Tyson Williams could end up taking that role completely. So James Conner, with his contract, he might be a sneaky cut candidate during training camp, depending on what they can do to get out of his contract. I'm not so sure, but if they can save a little bit of money in his contract, I could see him potentially just being a cut candidate. This coaching staff is not married to him. They weren't the ones that pushed for that contract, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And now looking at their run blocking, this is where, you see Froholt. He's probably the best run blocker out of the starting 5. That's really where his game is strong. I think that's why they signed him and why he's projected to be a starter. Paris Johnson's a little bit of his run blocking ability is just a little bit better than his pass blocking ability. I think long term, they're going to get just about as even amount of productivity out of him in both aspects of the offense. Will Hernandez is a little bit worse as a run blocker. I think he's just a solid guy for them to have. Then we look at DJ Humphries. Run blocking is just not his game, but he's such a quality pass blocker. That's why he gets the starting reps, and he's still probably the best overall offensive lineman. Now you look at Kelvin Beachum, he gets a 70. And this is where I really feel like it's odd to me that Beachum seems to be the projected starter over Josh Jones, because when we look at the depth, we'll move on to depth. Josh Jones, for me, is by far the best run blocker on this offensive line. He gets the best grade, run or pass, of any of the offensive linemen here with his run blocking ability, beating out DJ Humphries' pass blocking grade of 81. He gets an 84. This is why I'm just confused about the Kelvin Beachum thing. I mean, is Beachum's experience, reliability, are they looking at it as maybe last year with Josh Jones was sort of like a fluke? I think it just takes time for offensive linemen to develop personally. Jackson Barton against the run is pretty solid as well. Maybe a little bit better than DJ Humphries even. Eli Wilkinson might be the best guard in terms of run blocking. It's really just his pass blocking that holds him back and allows guys like Johnson and Hernandez to work ahead of him. John Gaines, I grade him the exact same against the pass. It'll be interesting to see how he develops moving forward. And then Smith and Daly, sort of the same story that I talked about already. They're both better run blockers, but I don't know that they're going to be good enough to make the team unless someone picks up an injury during training camp, someone gets traded or a surprise cut. Maybe Beachum gets cut and Josh Jones slides into that right tackle spot and it frees up a spot for someone like Lycidas Smith to step in, or Dennis Daly to step in, depending on how they view their versatility in terms of being able to play inside and out. But overall, Josh Jones, I think, is really somebody that stands out as a backup. And this is true, I think, across all 32 teams. I'm trying to just, thinking off the top of my head, there isn't really anyone who stands out like this, who grades so high, who doesn't seem to be somebody who's a projected starter as of yet. So there you can see the positional summary that we just went over. You can see the grades there. And then you can also see the scores I gave in terms of depth. And you can see the run blocking in particular. It's very close. And that's because of Josh Jones. So if you plug in Josh Jones over Kelvin Beachum, you actually will drastically improve your run blocking. And it might improve the overall performance of the offense just a little bit in terms of playing against the run. It wouldn't really nudge the pass blocking game at all because they got the exact same grade. So it'd be interesting to see how that really would work out. But I think overall what you can see is not a lot of depth on this roster. Tight end position, the offensive line again with the pass blocking, running backs, it's just not wide receiver, just not a lot of depth going on for this team. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's really the downfall, is that when you have a lack of depth and you're not significantly top heavy, that's what separates good teams from bad teams. You look at the overall offensive summary, they have the 31st offense in the NFL according to my grades with a score of 138. The worst passing offense in the NFL, 67.4, but the 24th rush offense was 70.6, and maybe if you plug in Josh Jones, they would even increase that a little bit, maybe to like 22 or 21. I'm not sure it gets them into the top 20 though. They just don't have the talent, I think, to justify that. But yeah, 31st overall offense. Now we're going to move on to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll start with the pass rush, and it starts right there with the edge rushers. Rookie B.J. Ojulari, who is, by my estimation, going to be the best pass rusher on day one for them. That's why they picked him up, to improve that pass rush. Cameron Thomas is a bit of an anomaly there. He is the second best pass rusher, but is he going to be an edge guy? That's the real question mark here. I think Ben Stilley, who they picked up, is the best interior guy for pass rushing. And then you see rookie Dante Stills in there, who I graded a 62, and that was one of the better interior pass rush grades on this roster. I said it when he got drafted. He really couldn't have ended up in a better situation as a day 3 pick because there's so much room on that interior for a guy like him to play. He's quite good against the run, as we'll talk about later, in comparison to the guys on the roster. And as a pass rusher, he can develop. He's a little bit smaller and undersized, of course, but it'll be interesting to see how he fits in because of the Cameron Thomas situation. Does Cameron Thomas kick in on early downs? Because they do have some options out there that might be better overall than, say, a Dante Stills. And we'll look at that depth now, specifically Jesse Luketa and Myjah Sanders. Luketa is actually a pretty quality edge rusher on passing down, so you can play him at one of the edge spots. You kick Cameron Thomas inside, and then maybe that does take Dante Stills off the field, and you just go with a more undersized, slightly more undersized, because the difference between Stills and Cameron Thomas is actually not that much. Jesse Luketa might bring more pass coverage ability to the pass rushing front four. So maybe if you want to drop him back and then blitz a linebacker, you might have a little bit more versatility there. Myjah Sanders also, he's got to really step up on passing downs. He was horrific against the run. We'll get to that. But in terms of passing downs, if he can step up, he can probably end up seeing some playing time, and then that would take time away from one of those interior guys as they'll kick Cameron Thomas inside, which was really something they projected to be doing last year when Cameron Thomas was really drafted with Myjah Sanders, but never really ended up happening. And then you got Demikeji and Gardick, who are just, depth guys. Gardick, I think, is more likely to make the team, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Looking at the interior depth, Carlos Watkins and Dante Stills, I think, will be competing for that second interior pass rusher role. I just think that's better to make it Dante Stills because he's a rookie, he's on a really cheap contract, and you can develop him maybe a little bit more. Then you got Rashard Lawrence, who's, against the pass now really significant. LJ Collier, one of the biggest first-round busts in a long time, in the last decade or so. Kevin Strong coming over from Tennessee, I think he's, again, kind of like Rashard Lawrence, more useful against the run. Ledbetter and Leki Fotu, I think they're going to be really competing for a roster spot. I think Fotu's size might play a role in his ability to make the team. He is, I think, by far the biggest of all the interior linemen, so having a true nose tackle might be something that will benefit him, at least getting him a roster spot. Not necessarily significant playing time, but a roster spot nonetheless. Now going on to the linebackers, and as we discussed with the coaching staff, the new defensive coordinator, Nick Rallis, is a linebackers coach from Philadelphia, and he developed TJ Edwards in particular into being quite a stud linebacker. And now against the pass, he sees Zaven Collins, 68, Chris Barnes coming over from Green Bay, 66. Zaven Collins, to me, is an X factor in all this. He could be a guy that can go and play the edge and kick Cameron Thomas inside. He's one of those linebackers that could do that. And then we can look at, for example, them then going to a 3-safety set in those situations, maybe playing more of a dime package in those situations. There's a lot of versatility that Zaven Collins can bring along, and I think he does stand to benefit the most from this new coaching staff. Chris Barnes, I think, is just one of those guys who you can put out there. You kind of know what you're going to get from him. And you look at the depth here, Kaiser White coming over from Philadelphia, and Owen Popoe, the rookie. There's not a lot of gap between those top four guys in terms of their ability in the passing game. I think Zaven Collins' blitzing ability really helps him out. And Chris Barnes' overall experience with Green Bay helps him out. I think Kaiser White potentially does find his way onto the field with significant playing time, especially early, just because of his experience in the system. But I think being undersized, he's like a smaller version of Isaiah Simmons, which is a weird thing to say. So I think he might be just the kind of that guy in that locker room to sort of guide people around the new defensive system. Ezekiel Turner is more of a run-stopping linebacker, as we'll see in a bit. And Josh Woods is just depth, might not make the team. Now we're going to the pass coverage, and this is where this team completely falls apart. As if they weren't great coming up to this. Budda Baker is their best in pass coverage, and I only grade him at a 71 in pass coverage. I think he's much better against the run, being a eighth man in the box type of a deal. I think they got a lot of guys who are like that. Not saying he can't play deep, but I would prefer for him to not be that guy. And we'll see that coming up with his run grade. But then Antonio Hamilton and Isaiah Simmons both get 69. I threw the rookie Garrett Williams in there, recovering from an injury, so he might not play early in the year, which is why he's graded a little bit lower. But I do think he's probably, by the end of the year, might end up being the best cornerback on the team, which isn't saying much, but I think it's possible. And then Chris Boyd coming over from Minnesota, I think probably getting an opportunity here, especially with his special teams experience, to be a guy out there just, maybe play him in the slot, and he's out there making tackles. Isaiah Simmons could move into the slot, and you could end up playing Jalen Thompson as well at one of the safety spots. Looking at the depth, though, Thompson doesn't grade out well against the pass. He's the fourth best safety for me against the pass, which isn't necessarily true against the run. We'll get to that. And then at the cornerback room, other than Antonio Hamilton, as Garrett Williams, slowly gets worked in, I think Marco Wilson will probably see some playing time early on. Hairston probably makes the team for special teams, kind of like Chris Boyd. Keitrell Clark was drafted this year. I think there's an outside chance that, depending on how he performs in training camp, if he impresses in any way, shape, or form, he could end up seeing a lot of playing time as the season goes on. Rashad Fenton, a veteran presence in there. And they got Juju Hughes and Kendall Brooks at the safety position, who are going to be competing for roster spots during training camp. Maybe a guy like Josh Thomas, who may be grading out a little bit better. They might see a little more potential in someone like Kendall Brooks, and then cut Josh Thomas and let Kendall Brooks take up some of that playing time. Now we're going to the defensive line against the run, and to me, this is where Dante Stills really has an opportunity to make the team, and he just plugs right into that J.J. Watt spot on early downs. Plugs right into it, that 4 technique, 5 technique, with then Cameron Thomas and Dennis Gardick on the outside. Then you got Rashard Lawrence and Kevin Strong. Again, this is really where their position on the team lives, is as interior run stoppers. But this is, again, Dante Stills. Maybe I'm too high on him. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm a little too high on Dante Stills. But to me, he couldn't have ended up in a better situation. And I think that as long as he performs decently and shows some potential and works hard, I think this team will keep him on, and he will see significant playing time on early downs at the very least, while they keep Cameron Thomas as more of an edge setter on the outside in the run game. Because looking at the depth for the edge, B.J. Ojulari needs to develop against the run. Jesse Luketa, same sort of thing. They're both just almost solely situational pass rushers right now. Demakeji, just, he's not great at anything. And Myjah Sanders, this is where he really struggles, and he needs to really step it up in this upcoming season to really earn his spot on the field and justify his draft position last year, and to beat out maybe somebody like a Cameron Thomas for some early down work, or beat out Dennis Gardeck for some early down work, to get more playing time in as a situational pass rusher, part of the rotation. But yeah, he needs to really work on that. He's just not great at it, and needs to really step up his game here in year 2. Especially now with the addition of B.J. Ojulari, who's just going to be eating up more snaps from Myjah Sanders moving forward. And with the interior depth, not a lot of it against the run. There's just not a lot of it. Yeah, it's bad. It's not great. Carlos Watkins and Ben Steely, I think, make the team just because they're better contributors against the pass than everybody else. And then after that, yikes. Ledbetter, Fotu, Collier, I think they may not be long for this world with the Arizona Cardinals. Now looking at their linebackers in the run game, these early down linebackers, Ezekiel Turner, Kaiser White, grade out the best for me. So they're the early down linebackers. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Kaiser White, especially on early downs, seeing maybe some significant playing time overall because of his familiarity with the system. He's somebody that Rallis and Gannon are comfortable with. He might end up being the guy with the green dot on the helmet throughout the early parts of the season, just to keep everybody coordinated, especially if someone like Budda Baker ends up being traded, which is likely, but not projected here just because it hasn't happened yet. And I think Turner gained some early down work as well. It's a big, run thumper, even though he's carrying the ball there. Let's assume that's from a fumble recovery. And then looking at the depth of the linebacker, Josh Woods, I do think they'll value Owen Popoe a little bit more, hoping they can develop him as a run stuffer, along with Zaven Collins, who can play inside and out, and Chris Barnes, who can play against the pass. So even though Josh Woods grades out third best out of the linebackers against the run, with the running game being less and less, I think he may be the odd one out, potentially. And now we're looking at their run support, and we'll start with the safeties. This is the best group that they have, is the safety group with the run support. Budda Baker, I give him an 80. Jalen Thompson, 77. That's really the strength of this team, which is unfortunate. At the cornerback position, Hamilton and Boyd, they're the two best graded out corners for run support, but you can see just from their grades, not good. They are not good. This is really where Budda Baker's game really shines through. And we look at some of the depth here, the defensive backs. Josh Thomas, grade 71. Kendall Brooks, 65. That's really their best group. The safety group against the run. They have guys that can come up, make tackles, surefire tacklers, thumpers. And then the cornerback room is probably the exact opposite of that. Their cornerback room against the run may be the worst grouping that they have in coordination with the safety group being the best against the run. Isaiah Simmons is going to need to really develop in that aspect. That's really been the weak part of his game for the most part. It'll be interesting to see how they develop him. Maybe they push him into linebacker full time. It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with Isaiah Simmons. Can they finally find a permanent spot for him, which I think has been really the thing that's been haunting him for most of his career so far. So just a positional summary here. And yeah, the safeties against the run, significantly better than any other group that they have. And then the cornerbacks against the run is the worst by far. The depth at linebacker against the run is not great. The depth on the interior is just slightly worse. But again, you can see from the depth grades, they just don't have the depth. They don't have the depth. If one of their top guys goes down, it could be a real nightmare. And imagine them trading Budda Baker away will significantly drop their grade against the run on the back end. They don't have much going on up front in the front 7, front 8. They're going to really need to maybe hang on to Budda Baker if they want to be able to stop the run almost at all. And just going for the defensive summary, the worst defense in the NFL, 133.7 overall grade. Their pass defense, 31st in the league with a 67.2, and their rush defense, 31st in the league, 66.5. Yeah, bad. Very bad. Very, very bad. And this is, I think, the ultimate thing that's going to drag them down, and it makes them the worst team in the NFL. Now looking at their schedule, 3-14. The red games are the losses. The blue games are the projected wins. And I don't have them getting a win until it's projected Kyler Murray may be returning. I think the game against Houston can go either way. They might be able to steal the game against Washington early on at week 1 of the year. But I just don't see this team really truly being able to compete with a lot of these teams early in the year without someone like Kyler Murray to at least boost that offense up a bit. Because, you got the Giants defense with Wink Martindale. You got Micah Parsons, Stephon Gilmore, Trayvon Diggs with Dallas. You got Nick Bosa and that defense in San Francisco. Cincinnati's defense, severely underrated. Very, very good across the board. The Rams with the return of Aaron Donald, even though that defense other than Aaron Donald is not very good. Seattle's always a solid team. Baltimore, pretty solid. It's Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. There's just not a lot. It doesn't seem like they're going to be able to keep up, is just really what it is. I think in Chicago, late in the year, you can kind of neutralize Justin Fields a bit. Against Atlanta, you don't really know what you're getting out of them. Cleveland, I just think, is so volatile in terms of what you can get from them week to week. And then, the Houston game, that's really up in the air. But, I gave them Cleveland, a win against Cleveland and a loss against Houston. You could easily switch those. And I think that would be just as likely. And they're still a 3-14 team. Just not good. Not good. So just hitting you guys up here with a final overall summary. 3-14 record, good enough for last in the division, good enough. Last in the conference, last in the league. And they have the 30th coaching staff, total offense 31st, total defense dead last in the league with the dead last pass offense. 24th rush offense, which is really it's the best part of their team, still bottom 10 in the league. And second to last in pass and run defense overall. Great time to be a Cardinals fan, huh? Great time. And there you have it. The first of 32 ranking videos. It's the Arizona Cardinals. Leave your comments in the comments section. What do you think of the grades I gave some of these players? What do you think will be the final result of this upcoming season for the Arizona Cardinals? Are they the worst team in the NFL? It seems to be a consensus at this point, especially with the injury to Kyler Murray. Who's your sleeper player on this team, perhaps? Who did you think I overrated? Who do you think I underrated? And I want to hear all those thoughts. Subscribe, like the video, help with those algorithms so you don't miss any of the future videos coming up. Going to do a couple of these a week leading up to the NFL season, trying to time it perfectly so that way the series is done by kickoff game in September something. So it's going to be a long road, 30 plus videos. And I'd like to thank you guys ahead of time for being a part of it and really helping me out. And I will see you guys with the next video soon. Or maybe it's already out because you were late watching this, but it's coming. See you then.